Aye.
Pull same sign. Any abstentions? That carries. All right, item 3 then is to approve the minutes from the January 11th meeting.
Approval.
Motion by Weaver.
Second.
All fair say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 4, consent and vote on expenses. Todd?
Yes, thank you. Just one expense for you today. This is work we're doing with the Iowa State Institute for Transportation on a trail condition forecasting tool to improve that. This was budgeted in the 2023 fiscal year budget for $60,000. We previously paid $15,000. This is the second payment on this project of $15,000. Staff would recommend approval. Happy to answer any questions.
All right.
I have a few.
Okay,
Sure.
go ahead.
We referenced policies. Where in this item, where are these policies and procedures documented and what do we mean by proposed? I just want to be able to access them and read them, but it says in our consent vote, it says proposed policies and procedures regarding contracts. and expenses.
Sorry, let me. Don't have that. All right.
I guess immediate answer.
Yeah, we have policies and procedures that we have on file regarding how much can be expended with executive committee approval versus policy committee approval,
Yeah.
that sort of. So we can get you copies of what those procedures are.
That would be helpful.
Essentially, I can approve expenses up to $2,500. Exec can approve expenses up to, I think it's $25,000 without taking it to policy unless there's some sort of immediate circumstance on a budget item. And then beyond that, it would take policy approval. This was approved in our overall budget by both exec and policy. It's just payment of the invoice.
Yes, and that's why I read in the MPO bylaws, the executive committee does have the authority up to 25,000. I didn't see anything in there specifically about the other piece. Where can I find a copy of this
Cool.
contract that we?
We'll send that to you, Lynn.
That must have been before
The contract.
for this particular piece,
Yeah, we can do that.
just so I can understand what we agreed to.
Sure.
It might be helpful just to attach it to the,
We'll send
to
it to
the
everybody.
agenda,
Yeah.
you know, as we start approving these contracts.
All right.
They're attached. Excuse me, down the wrong pipe.
Thank you.
All right. Any further with that? Is there a motion on this?
Move to approve.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? All right, that carries. Item 5 is the presentation on the draft fiscal year 22 audit. Todd?
Yeah, thank you. We have Dave Ellis with Demon and Company here with us today to present the audit. This was shared with the Finance Subcommittee last week on February 3rd. The draft audit was included in the agenda. Dave, I'll let you take it away from here.
Hey, thanks, Todd. Yeah, my name is Dave Ellis. I'm a partner with Demon and Company. We have completed the audit, and the draft, I guess, is what you're looking at. I'm gonna be looking at a final copy here, so I will, if there's any changes, I'll let you know on that. Going over to page 3 is the independent auditors report. This has changed a little bit from the prior years, but right up front is our opinions. In our opinion, the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We conducted our in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. The third paragraph, or the third item there, change in accounting principle. During the year, the MPO did adopt GASB standard number 87 leases. We adjusted the financial statements to to record those leases. So that now you have a lease liability and a lease asset on your financial statements, which you would not have had in the past. The financial statements are responsibility of management. Again, our responsibilities on the next page are to issue an opinion on the financial statements. We do lay out a few more of our responsibilities in the auditor's opinion this year. I'm not going to go through all those, but we've always done these, but for transparency, I guess we're putting a little bit more information in the actual auditor's report. So those were items that have always been done, but more disclosed this year. I'm going to skip over to page 8. There's a comparison of numbers here so your total assets went from about 5.1 million down to 2.9 million. That was due to a large receivable in the prior year that was recorded. Looking down at liabilities, your liabilities went down about $3 million from 3.9 down to 900,000. And that liability was related to also that receivable. Those two all kind of offset in the prior year. But your total net position went up about 291,000 for the year. Majority of that is unrestricted at 1.6 million, and 66,000 is related to net investment and capital assets. On the next page, page 9, is your statement of changes in net position, a comparison from the prior year. Again, total revenues went up about $4 million from 5.9 to 9.9. Expenses went up from about 6.2 up to 9.6, about 3.8 million increase. So your change in net position compared to last year, 291,000 increase compared to 269,000 decrease in the prior year. Let's skip all the way back towards the back of the report to your scheduled expenditures of financial awards, federal awards, I should say. So during the year, you expended, this is on page 36, you expended $8.4 million in federal expenditures. 7.4 was in the National Infrastructure Investments program. Then a little over $1 million in the Iowa Department of Transportation Highway Planning and Construction program. Both these programs qualified as major programs this year, so we did test both of those. And I'll go over my findings here in just a little bit. But going over to page 38, is our independent auditors report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance related to an audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. We did identify 2 material weaknesses in internal control. These have been carried over from prior years. The first material weakness is on page 44, segregation of duties. Again, you got a small staff there. You are adding some people, so the duties are getting more segregated. But until you get a staff large enough or get enough people involved in the process, you're going to have that segregation of duties. Very common in a small organization like yourselves. The second item on page 45 is financial reporting. We did have, again, this year, we had some significant audit adjustments as part of our audit process. Those have been obviously reflected in these financial statements, but to have proper financial reporting, you need to get those done before we get in there to do the audit. The major one was obviously the new lease standard, which wouldn't necessarily be expected to be known by staff there, but those are some of the entries that we make. The cash basis financial statements, there weren't any adjustments to those. It was more the cash to accrual adjustments that we were doing. On page 40 is our independent audit report on compliance for each major program. Again, and on internal control, we did not identify any compliance issues with your major federal programs, but we did have one internal control segregation of duties was still, that's part of it, involved in your federal programs also. So we identified that as an internal control issue with your federal programs. on page 46. So that would be similar to your regular financial reporting. Going over to page. Sorry, I got my pages. On page 43 is kind of a summary of our independent auditor's results. Again, the material weaknesses in over your financial statements. We issued an unmodified opinion on financial statements. We did have material weaknesses over the financial statements. Had material weakness over the federal awards, but issued an unmodified opinion on your major federal programs. We did not have any audit findings to disclose regarding the federal programs. Down at the bottom, you do not qualify as a low risk auditee. That's just related to your federal programs, and that is related to the fact that you do have material weaknesses in your internal control, and that's why you are not qualify as a low risk auditee. The only other item that on page 47 is your budget to actual. In budgeting, you don't budget according to function, you budget according to project, so it's a little bit different budgeting. Overall, you did not exceed your budget, but your general government function, you did exceed it there. But in your overall budget, you did not exceed, and that was the only finding we had on the statutory reporting. So again, some of these items, the corrective action plan and the prior year audit findings, several of those findings were there from prior years. Page 49 and 50 are those two items, and the comments and corrective action plans are stated back there. So I will open up for questions or comments.
All right, well, Dave, any questions for Dave on this?
I have many.
All right,
Being new to this, I'm trying to figure my way through.
All right.
This is my first audit piece, but we have a response on page 44 under that finding number 2021-001 that says we hired additional accounting staff. My question is, how many accounting staff do we actually have?
We have one accountant.
Yeah, Miranda Miller was hired last year, mid-year. And then we also have a bookkeeping service that we use as well, as needed.
So Rhonda was hired in July, so that would have been this fiscal year, not the fiscal year that was being audited here. So hopefully going forward, that'll address some issues.
So we have one.
Mhm.
We didn't have one before.
No.
So we didn't hire additional per se, we hired one. On page 45, it says management lacks the proper knowledge and training to select and apply accounting principles and prepare financial statements, including footnote disclosures. Do we have a plan to resolve that?
There's additional training being had, and that was also partly why we brought Rhonda on board, as well as using the bookkeeping service to help address those comments.
And I know from your comment earlier that we had provided the audit to the finance committee before we had received it. So one of my comments was we have a full well-qualified financial professionals in finance subcommittee. I would suggest we empower the finance subcommittee to educate our finance staff member and the director about fulfilling their responsibilities, or we need to look again at hiring a full-time bookkeeper to do some of that work. Just an observation of mine.
well, we have one now.
She is full-time,
Yeah,
correct?
it is full-time.
Yeah.
Since July.
Yes.
Right.
Right, but so we haven't corrected some of the things that I think that she brought on.
But this was looking back at FY 22, which
Right.
he was not here.
Right.
So going forward, yeah, we have.
Yeah, so
Yeah, so the next audit, we should have some of these things hopefully
Correct.
corrected, because we have a full-time person that we agreed to put into that place.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a full-time person, and I'm looking at some of the documents we're getting right now, and they're woefully inadequate. That's why I'm bringing this. to your attention.
No,
And that was discussed by the finance subcommittee as well last week, is making adjustments and providing more information, not only to this group too, but to finance subcommittee, so they can review it and before it gets to this group too. So
Right.
those are two points.
So looking at page 50, we keep talking. Again, it's about segregating the duties, so we have some level of checks and balances. From what I'm seeing in our bylaws, there are more than enough resources to do that segregation. If you look at the MPO bylaws, the executive committee officers, the MPO chair may sign all contracts, agreements, applications, and other instruments associated with MPO operations, which could be checks and other things to make sure there's another layer there. The MPO secretary in section 4 shall cause to have all funds received by the MPO deposited in the name of the MPO, federally insured financial institutions the MPO may choose, shall cause to be dispersed payments of MPO authorized expenditures named the MPO and require 2 signatures of individuals duly authorized by the MPO to disperse MPO funds. I hope that's happening today. I don't know how many signatures there are.
All our checks require 2 signatures.
Fantastic. That answers the question. Shall cause to be reviewed and approve all requests for payment subcontractors by the MPO. This is the treasurer's responsibilities. Shall cause to be prepared all reimbursement requests to state and federal funding agencies. Shall cause to have prepared monthly financial statement and progress report to the MPO. Shall cause all financial records kept in accordance with generally accepted accounting procedures. Shall cause to have the audit of the MPO records and accounts, all the subcontractors in accordance with the Office of Management Budget Circular A-102 Attachment B requirements. It also says the executive director shall act as the assistant secretary treasurer. So then, in my mind, that means Todd can do pretty much all of those things that our treasurer can do, correct?
Correct.
Since we're not sitting here. So I don't understand why we are still, we have this year to get that straightened out, but obviously I think there's enough depth in staff to make sure that we're doing those things. And if not, then maybe we need to hire a bookkeeping firm and make sure we're doing those things.
Which we have done.
But you said on occasion, and that was last year.
No, they review our financials monthly and help us make sure we're categorizing those expenses in the proper manner. We used them more extensively before Rhonda was hired to help with data, financial entries. And that we're not as using them as much now that Rhonda's on board, but we still use them.
Okay.
They're called the bookkeeper. You'll see that expense in our financials.
So I'm reading here, we do not make budget adjustments as required by state code. Our response is we will in the future if applicable. It appears this year that we have at least one employee reimbursement for travel review, and I'm imagining this policy is likely one of several items that may be out of date or missing from our employee policies.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
one of the statements we have in our audit talks about not making budget amendments as required by state code. And our response, or your response, is we will in the future if applicable. So when we have something that seems to be out of place, which right now, if you look at what we are paying in personnel expenses, we're over that 58% mark. I'm assuming by the end of June, we'll probably be beyond that.
No.
Are we planning on making a budget amendment to cover that when the time comes?
If we would need to, we would make a budget amendment, though, 58%, we're in the ninth month of the year. 8th month of the year. So yeah, if a budget amendment is needed, we would certainly do that. We do at times move funds from different items. Say we had $10,000 for budgeted for computers and we didn't expend all that money, but we had another category that was a little over budget. We would make a budget amendment to move some of that money from computers to whatever that other item was.
And if I read correctly in what David presented us, there was a piece about employee reimbursement for a travel issue.
Yeah, that was just a miscommunication because we had a travel policy in place and we provided that to Dave, and that's not in the final audit report.
Okay, when was our employee policy manual last updated? Do we know?
2021. And we've tweaked it a little since then.
Okay, obviously there's changes pretty much annually in these.
Right.
I know Pleasant Hill, we just went through the process of having hours reviewed again. That it doesn't matter by whom, but Davis Law Firm. I just want to make sure that our policies are up to date, that we don't have anything missing, that we're acting in accordance with state and federal requirements. So if there's an issue, I would suggest we probably have somebody take a look at that. Maybe that's a part of next year's plan budget.
And just to kind of, since we're talking about employee policy handbook and things like that. I guess a question for you, Todd, and I know you're in a different situation than probably some of your employees. What is our policy for working at home, working out of state, working, where does it say in our handbook what our policy is, and have we approved that? Or is that just strictly done by your approval and those changes are made at that time? Because I haven't seen anything. I know we're in a different situation than we were in 2021.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering what is our policy at the MPO? You know, we're working on, and I've said this at the budget meeting on Monday at the city council. We're trying to get people back to work downtown Des Moines. And to do that, we need to lead by example. And leading by example is whatever organizations or whatever we're doing, that's getting people back in seats and not working remotely. So I'm wondering what the policy is here at the MPO.
Well, we've adjusted it, obviously with the pandemic, we allowed people to work from home. We've adjusted it to time in the office and time not in the office. We can get you the policy because I can't give you verbatim what it says off the top of my head, Joe. But we can provide that and we can do a full review of the whole policy manual, include that in the budget for the next fiscal year and have that done. But I understand what you're saying and we'll get you the policy.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't approved it. I don't know if I would think that would be the role of the policy committee of making, not only just the director of you making those decisions, but I think that at the executive level and the policy level, we should be able to have input on what we expect from your employees and going forward, how we're going to adjust that or not adjust it.
We can look at, when do we last review the employee manual?
21.
So, and
It's not
Dave's,
that far out.
yeah, so if we want to do another review, it's just gonna cost money. That's the only thing we can recently review.
I'm just asking about the policy of working
And you should talk
remotely.
about, you should talk about one, hybrid work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what our policy is. I mean,
We're all doing that with that now, Bob, in our own jurisdictions. We're in the county, we're like, okay, during COVID, people, got used to working at home and maybe it's been more convenient, what have you, and I think, I don't know, from my standpoint, and I'm 1 out of 5 supervisors, but when the general public comes into our offices, they go to, let's pick up general services, and they go in this great big corner of our building and the whole place is dark and there's about 7 or 8 desks empty and there's no one there in the middle of the day on Tuesday, you know, like, where the hell is everybody at, right? Well, they're all working, oh, well, wait, taxpayer dollars, you know, so it's just, you know, these guys, and I know that millennials, at least a lot of those folks, that's part of a job perk, being able to work from home. I just think that in the public sector, maybe it's a little bit different. So anyway, from the county standpoint, we're trying to work through those issues
Right.
now ourselves.
No, we did same in my day job, same as that city.
Right.
I get that. So, but I'd like to keep on the.
Well, that's just part, I mean, we brought up the policies, so.
No, I understand. I just wanted to get through the audit. Let's get through the audit here first. Any questions directly related to the audit, and then we can bring up some of these.
Well, I guess the direct question today would be did the auditors actually review the FY 2023 Unified Planning Work Program and Budget document?
We had a copy. We did look at the FY 23 budget, yes.
And is that what we have? Is that quote the budget, or is there a different budget document?
No, that's the budget.
That's the budget.
Okay. One of the pieces that I was noting in there is what we have for report piece. That's a screenshot. Is under salaries and wages, and then we have fringe benefits, and fringe benefits is $705,845. Then I go to Unified Planning Work Program budget. And it has one that says summary of employee benefits. And you get down to the total fringe benefits and it says $662,926.
And the difference between the two in the 23 budget, this gets a little confusing, is whether the MIPA employee is included in that or not. And I believe there might be a footnote on there saying that that might just be for the MPO employees, not including the MIPA employee. But I'd have to look into that a little bit more, but that should be.
And I didn't see the footnote unless it's someplace else in the text.
What page is that on this audit? Where are we at?
That's not the audit, that's from the work program document.
That's why I was asking if the work program was actually a part of what we were
And
doing.
again, this audit is for FY 22. We're looking at FY 23 budgets.
Okay,
Going, that's additional, and
thank you very much.
that's another
Appreciate that.
So we're looking back.
that we're gonna talk about.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure whatever we're doing here obviously is correct.
Right.
We're getting complete reporting. And generally accepted rules would include 3 reports, correct? Isn't that what we get in our individual jurisdictions generally?
Report. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
A revenue statement. Expense. And I'd have to dig through my notes to get that third one.
If there's reports that you'd like to see, we can certainly provide them. This is what we've historically provided, but we can certainly provide more.
So it should be, if I understand the accounting process, really should have 3 separate reports, a fund balance, a revenue, and expense report. And those should be coming from our financial accounting software. Do we know what software we're using for our accounting?
QuickBooks.
Okay.
So we can kick that out, certainly.
Yeah, I think that would be advantageous, and it should probably come out monthly and not quarterly. So we can track what's going on. And are we using the same software for payroll? What are we using?
Well, QuickBook feeds into it, but our payroll system is run by a company called Paylocity that runs our payroll system.
But I assume that kicks back into QuickBooks automatically or something, right?
It does, I use Paylocity.
Yeah. So really, you're just looking for a profit loss and a balance statement.
Yeah.
which can be produced by Denman and Company, because I actually use them and they can give you that each month.
Oh, quick question.
But Denman's not our,
Now,
they're only our auditor, they're not our regular.
then our bookkeeper should be able to give us
Yeah.
that same.
So-
month.
Again, Len, I'm not trying to cut you out, I guess I'm just getting to the point of, I think we are losing a little track from where we are in the audit versus maybe general accounting questions. And I just want to wrap up on the report. This is draft operative. We're not accepting the audit today, so we still have another month.
Yeah,
I think the bigger question is gonna be coming later, to talk about
Yeah.
the budget that's coming up.
Right.
I think there's probably gonna be a lot more questions
Right.
going forward.
You want to.
And what I'm looking at is-
Committee, right, that needs to be meeting quarterly, you can certainly be part of that committee.
Yeah.
And maybe that needs to happen for me to get a better grasp
All right.
of some of this.
Yeah.
So if I can be included on those, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, we can certainly get anything answered on this, but I wanted to just kind of keep this more toward the audit. Right now, just get through the audit, any questions directly related to the fiscal year 22 audits.
And I want to make sure that what we're doing for this year is correct, because we've also accepted those responsibilities now for MIPA.
Sure.
And if we are not doing things well here and we have another poor audit, obviously that reflects on another organization. So I just want to make sure we're doing what we need to do to get these audit issues resolved so that we don't see them recurring.
MIPA's obviously complicated things. I mean, you said it yourself in the statement you just made. It's complicated our financials to the point where it's difficult to separate each one. And that's definitely an issue, and we'll have to address that as going forward through this agenda.
Thank you for your time and patience.
All right, absolutely, Lynn. If you have any further questions, let's get them. We'll get anything answered we want to get answered, but again, this is just a draft of the audit for this year, and we will be accepting it next month. So we still have another month to review. If you have any further questions, please get them in. So, good questions. Any further with respect to the audit? All right, we will move on then. Thank you. Item 6 is a report and vote on the contract for travel demand model consultant services. Bill.
Thank you. So the MPO maintains a tool called the travel demand model that's used by not only the MPO, but also the Iowa DOT, our member jurisdictions, their consultants and so forth. We update this model. Typically, we maintain it all the time, but we update it. We do a major update when we start the long range transportation plan process, which we are undergoing now. That plan is due next fall of 2024. So what we're asking for today is a contract between the MPO and the consulting firm HDR. HDR, we've worked with in the past to update our model, and they also help us from time to time more on an on-call basis to run the model when needed. This total project cost would be about $71,000, $71,500. And that cost would be split across FY 23 and 24. Again, it's important that we have this model and that everyone has confidence in this model. That's why we use some outside consulting assistance with that. We also work with the Iowa DOT. I would note that the consultant at HDR is a former DOT employee, so they're very familiar with not only what we need to do, but also what the DOT requires and that whole process. So.
Go ahead, I'll let you finish.
So that's really what we have for you today. And we'll talk about the budget later on. We can put this in the FY 24 budget. We heard from HDR that they expect about 35% of the cost to be in this fiscal year, in FY 23. We had $10,000 budgeted already. There's some other things, and again, we'll talk about this later on. Expenses that we don't anticipate actually incurring, so we could switch that over to the model as well. So we could take care of about 25,000 of it in this fiscal year and put the balance to 45,000 or so in next fiscal year. If you proceed forward with this.
When's the last time it was updated? How often does this have to be updated?
It happens about once every 5 years.
Because that's a pretty expensive update.
Right. And so it's a one-time thing, at least once every 5 years.
5 years later, you gotta do it again.
Right. So it's more of a special project, and we don't do $70,000 every year, but once every 5 years.
So our staffing capacity that we have been working with the DOT, we can't do it ourselves. We have to sub it out.
It would be more advantageous for us to sub it out. We have staff that can run the model, but to build it and get it to where it needs to be in that level of detail. If we it would take all of someone's time plus then some, where we can just contract it out and makes it more efficient.
It's a risk if we don't update it.
If we don't update it, and Z and Andrew can maybe speak to this too, or Todd, but if we don't update it, then the figures that the model spits out might not be accurate. When communities go to update their travel model or their interchange justification reports or other studies, there's just not the confidence that it's actually telling us what we needed to tell it, which could jeopardize future projects and so forth. A lot of the times, those numbers are needed to be in those projects to justify traffic volumes and so forth.
Well, this is like if we put on the long range plan an interchange between us and Mitchellville, this data would help back that.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, we need it, Ted.
I'm not arguing that we don't need it. I think it's a good thing. And I know historically we've used HDR. It would, my question was the amount of staff that we already have,
It is a very technical process in updating the model. There's a lot of detailed information and calculations that go into it. And as Dylan alluded to, it would take one of our staff members all their time to do this and to validate the data and do corrections. It's just a much more efficient use of resources to have someone who does it all the time. That's their job day in and day out to do this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's an expensive update, right? And so I just want to know that it's a must have and not a nice to have.
No, I would say this is a must have.
Well, especially with all of the outlying communities, the way they're growing and changing. I mean, not just Altoona, Bonnaroo, Pleasant Hill, Carlisle, Ankeny, the transportation's changing daily. I mean, so I could see why it'd be necessary. I mean, we're five, you kind of stuck, you got nothing left.
I got you over there.
See, oh, now. It's on you.
Is it about, it's not updating our existing software, it's actually gathering data.
Correct. So
So,
you basically need to make the model replicate what traffic looks like today.
Yeah, but I remember Dylan serving on a long range transportation plan committee. I think Scott started seeing it back then when sharing it, whenever all the data
Yeah.
that the subcommittee
Back to
gathered was all a result of that information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so what we'll do with this, once we get the model actually up and running, obviously the consultants or your communities and their consultants can use it, but for the MPO, this helps us understand which projects should go into the long range plan, which ultimately receive STVD funding and so forth too. So we rely on this quite a bit as well. It's not the end all be all, but it's definitely a powerful tool that we have.
You said last 5 years, you say you got to update like every 5.
Every 5 years or so, yeah. And if we got to this point where our growth stopped and our traffic volumes remain the same, that's a little different, but we keep growing. We've gone through all these changes. So we need to stay on top of it.
All right, I'll move approval.
Well, Hickman Road needs to be remodeled, so yeah.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Pose same sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 7 is report and vote on Polk County multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan update. Dylan.
Okay, this is another project that we wanted to bring for you and have a little more of a detailed conversation, especially as it relates to the conversation we had last month on contracts and responding to the RFPs and that sort of thing. But we expect Polk County will issue an RFP for their update to their hazard mitigation plan. The reason we bring this to you is that the MPO did this plan last time in 2019, and this followed a conversation we had at this committee of whether the MPO should do this. And at the time, it made sense. We were approached by the staff in Polk County. They needed something done fairly quickly and a little bit less of a budget than maybe what a consultant would do. And given our relationship with all the communities, our ability to collect data and analyze that and produce plans, it just made sense and was a good fit. And that project was 60,000 last time. So again, knowing that this is coming up, knowing that we did it last time, I don't know that Polk County staff has officially requested us to do it. I know that's a little.
When you say Polk County staff, Dylan, who are you referring to?
AJ last time.
Okay.
Cameron.
In Cameron, yeah. So I know there's been some conversations and they like the work we did, but given the conversations we've been having recently, we didn't want to just go out there and do this without running it past everybody.
But that is for members' community.
Correct.
I mean, that's not the conversations we were having is not apples to apples. I mean, this is a
I understand.
contract that you guys have done in the past.
But we
with
did
our
ask them to ask us
member
about
communities.
I think that, and we'll talk about this later in the agenda, but I think everyone agreed transportation, yep, If it's for a member government and not transportation, that's a probably, but we just wanted to make sure first.
The only thing I'd say, and I'm supportive of this, I read through it and knowing that AJ Mum is engaged and he's working with you guys on it. I just, in the future, I'm just more cognizant now about, it seemed like, and forget about this one for a second, well, this may be relevant also, but it seems like there's a lot of overlapping on things that we do, and I know we're working with other jurisdictions and other entities and what have you, but initially when I read it, I thought, okay, this should be an AJ shop, but AJ's working with you guys to get it done, and that's okay. But I look at other things that we do that, like, other jurisdictions are already doing, and so that, anyway, but I just wanted to be cognizant of the fact that, we don't want to be overlapping, duplicating things that someone else is already doing. I mean, I saw a budget piece recently where, we're putting $10,000 out of the public works budget towards watershed management. Like, we got 3 full-time staff in just Polk County that are doing watershed management that we've added to do watershed management stuff. And we got at least a couple in Polk County Conservation that are doing that. I'm thinking, okay, who's doing what? And,
But to that point, for our conversation, maybe they should go out and get some bids and test the market. And see
Yeah, and there's no guarantee we'll get this. This is just for us to.
Just whether we
respond to
answer
it.
the RFP.
If they pick us, great. We just want to make sure that.
But I mean, that we can go back to the same question that we've had where now we're competing with brick and mortar places that are actually paying for the assessments that we're doing here. So, I mean, I understand. To me, this is somewhat different and, I'm going to defer to the Polk County representative on this. But to me, this is different because it's a member community. We have a Polk County representative that serves on the executive policy committee. To me, that's different, but we are competing with brick and mortar places that are actually paying for the assessment of all of us being here and everyone else. So, I mean, yeah, that needs to be a decision that we got. I mean, I know we've done it in the past, but I think that we've entered into some things that have kind of opened everyone's eyes up to be like, okay, what are we doing here? And so it's probably why we have so many questions.
So that's one of my questions on how much of this is transportation related? Because yes, it's membership, that's all of our members, but it's really transportation related. That was my first question when I was. Because I'm not familiar with
All the credentials.
Yeah, there's 2 pieces of the plan that would be very much transportation related directly. So one is infrastructure failure is one of the hazards and another is transportation incidents. We also run into transportation when it comes to urban flooding, the flash flooding and pieces like that, windstorms, those pieces are brought into those. But yes, it is a piece of those, whereas there's only 2 places where it directly is transportation. The transportation is affected through all the disasters in some sort of capacity, and so that is noted in there.
When did we first start doing this, Dylan, for emergency management?
The first time we did it was 2018, 2019.
Okay.
So I have a couple. One, it is beyond the transportation mission of the MPO as far as the 2080 agreement. And I know we still have legal review going back and forth on that, so I'm very reluctant to step into that. Because if it's contrary to what we can do. Understand there's a couple of transportation components, but you can bring transportation into a lot of these things. I understand what we did before was because, quite frankly, Polk County Emergency Management was in a bind. I had a discussion with AJ about that. And the state had cut down the amount of money that they were actually providing to do that work. So that was a part of the issue. A part of my question would be, if we approve Polk County is only one of the counties represented by the MPO. Does that open the door for us to be doing all of the counties? Which could be of concern depending upon the level of work we have, again, and staff to do it. Because I can't say no to one and yes to another.
Right. With your background in public safety, you're gonna probably be more educated on this than most of us, but only I went by, I guess, back at the time when this came up was that, emergency management, of course, has all the different jurisdictions that are members of the emergency management board. So they're represented from that standpoint. And I agree with everything everyone said. It's probably, you could probably tie transportation, anything. And I'm not here today to argue that we should be doing this all. I guess my point is, you know, some of these things as we move ahead, based on the discussions that we've had over the last couple months, I think. Lord knows I don't want to seem like I'm flexible, but.
Nobody will agree with
No way, but I just, you know,
We're not at risk.
yeah. No, but some of these things like this, I think we've done it in the past. It is an all member governments. But you know, it's expanding and continuing to expand and trying to be everything to everybody. I think if we want to draw a line someplace, but I'm gonna be supportive of this. Because emergency management initially asked for us to provide these services. I know that AJ did, so I don't know what the discussions you've had with them recently, Dylan, but
Yeah, I don't know if we've had as many direct discussions this time
We've
around.
been told that when I know you guys are using BidNet now, but when the RFP is sent out, I know emergency management plans will set it up, should people who have done hazard mitigation plans and us.
okay,
Cameron and I have been talking on a number of different kind of transportation hazard mitigation projects that we want to get on the ground and it's come up in a handful of conversations, but there's been no commitment that we would apply or, you know, submit a response or take on the
But
contract.
Joe brings up a good point. If we're competing against a bunch of other brick and mortars, do we really need to be doing that? If there are other companies that are willing to, we've done it in the past when they had no other option, right?
And,
That's not the case here, and this truly is not transportation.
and, you know, we talked about the HDR contract, that we don't have, you know, someone to do that full time. Well, is that because we're taking on other contracts like this? Because you got a ton of really qualified people sitting over there, you know, that's to my point. I mean, if we're gonna take on all these other things, but then we have to go sub something out that is really the transportation, what we should be doing. I don't know how to balance that, and I'm just being honest with you.
when it comes down for me as Joe, I think personally, I think that in a perfect world, AJ Shop does this.
Yeah,
AJ does this internally within emergency management. But evidently at some point, they couldn't do it. Right?
Yes.
so can they not, then they can't do it now either?
I don't know. I haven't gone into that much depth about
When I
it.
leave here,
Okay.
I'm going to wear another hat at the county emergency management meeting.
Right,
And the discussion I've had with AJ as of yesterday was the state has ponied up more money to be able to do this mitigation plan. They are right now in negotiation, as well as many other county emergency management agencies across the state, with Iowa Homeland Security and Emergency Management
mhm,
to develop a single contract that any entity can grab onto.
I see. That makes some sense.
I'll just note that last time that was one of the complicated pieces, is that we got two different phases of the contract. So they put out phase one and it was just like the risk assessment and community profiles, which most places, you know, that's very easy to do. And then the phase two was the mitigation strategy. So it was very choppy last time. And even I would say that the timeline for this one is no different than the last one. When they get this RFP out, say, if the state finally figures out how to do the one contract thing, the contract's not gonna, or the RFP is not gonna get out until March. You're not gonna have replies and review until April, and you have less than 1 year then to have a plan in place and then send it to FEMA for approval. And so that's one of the things that when Cameron and I speak about it, we have the last draft plan. I have all the table numbers that we need to go to expedite the process. I have the contacts and things like that. And so it might just be efficiency really is that piece. And, you know, I think that there's other opportunities as well, but I think that efficiency piece is we're updating the plan of our own, kind of similar to the LRTP, right? Like we created the last one, I can kind of.
You're actually updating their plan that you
Their
have in the
plan,
system.
yeah.
It's theirs. They can
It's
get that
theirs.
and give it to the next person. So
Makes sense.
Yeah.
it's not like ours. Yeah. But my take on this is, I think it goes back to is they send out an RFP, we shouldn't be bidding on it. We should not put a dollar amount in there because that's it's unfair for us to bid on it. When this should come before us is when they don't get it, like we just didn't get a bid for our comp plan update just in the Northwest. Too small, One was working with Bondurant, so they couldn't bid on it. The 4 others didn't have time to do it. So we're gonna do it internally as a small little piece. But when we use our government side to bid on it and we undercut the private sector, that's the problem that we see here. And so when the RFP goes out, we should not respond. When we do respond is when they can't get anybody to do it. They can't find anybody to do it and they're in a bad spot. Then it comes to our board and we say, maybe we should help. with
Because it's
this.
a member.
Yes, and all the data she's talking about, we have, and we just need to update it and it's efficient. Well, if
They have it too.
they have it too, they can just give it to the new person, whoever wins the bid. And so that's, to me, going forward, that. What seems to be happening is everybody says we don't have time, so they dump, oh, I don't have staff, and they dump it on MPO, and MPO says, well, I don't have time or staff, so we're gonna hire a bunch. And that's what everybody's trying not to do, but we keep doing it. That's been the takeaway.
Hired staff, though.
Yeah, in this case, we would have staff capacity now to do it, but understanding.
Right, and that's one thing, looking at it, is when they do come to us after they don't get any bids. We do have staff, that's the time we jump in and say, well, let's do it. If we don't have staff, we say, sorry, we can't.
When it comes to us, and then we can make that.
Correct, yeah, and I think that's a point that we all had in that meeting.
Yes.
But if we go around,
Pretty
saying-
clear.
we start RFPing everybody's stuff, we can undercut everybody.
Yeah, because we're subsidized by government, by their tax.
So I would just recommend don't respond to the RFP on things like this. Have them come back to us if they have problems, but.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, we might, I mean,
So are we voting? Do
we
have
could
to
end
vote
up
on
doing
this?
it too.
Yeah,
Well, we don't have a motion.
yeah, no, so let's,
I'm asking for a motion. Is there a motion?
yeah, I would agree with Dean that we just hold off and let them work through it and.
When it comes back to us and they don't have anybody to it, we all say, yeah, let's go ahead and take care of
Is there a motion?
So basically, we're making a motion not to.
You want me to make a motion to
Well-
say that we're not gonna submit it to the RFP?
Well, if there's not a motion, if there's not a motion, you don't have to vote on it, so.
That's right. That's why I'm calling the question.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Is there a motion? Not hearing any sighs. All right. We'll move on then. Item 8, report and vote on the Green Iowa AmeriCorps opportunity. Todd?
Well, thank you. We were approached by Unized Energy for Energy and Environment to host some of their AmeriCorps interns, for lack of a better term, though they're professional staff. This group was formed back in 2009. As a host, the MPO would receive 2 to 3 full-time AmeriCorps members from the spring through September, plus a couple additional folks over the summer to help with what we typically have interns do during that time. The MPO would pay $4,000 plus house the folks. Green Iowa AmeriCorps covers the HR and payroll portion of that. They could do help with sustainability projects, including transportation related projects. As I mentioned, it would reduce the amount we budgeted and for summer interns over that time. I think that's the only slide.
Why are we paying them? We're housing them, right?
The requirement would be that we pay $4,000 for the two to 5 people. Everything else is covered by AmeriCorps. That's just our contribution to it is $4,000.
It would be a reduction in what we pay interns over the summer. So it would be swapping out one cost for this cost.
Yeah, we have those at Metro Waste Authority, yeah. Opportunities for you to learn.
I'll move approval item 8.
I'll second that.
And we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, item 9 is report and vote on the election of the officers for 2023. And again, the committee on this was Mark Holm from Ankeny, Jeff Walters from Polk City, and Tom Hadden from West Des Moines. And Mark, are you on? Mark on?
I don't think he's on, Bob. They met last week, I think it was Monday, discussed the slate of officers and the slate before you is what they recommend moving forward. Mayor Andewig as chair, Stephanie Reeve as vice chair, and Ted Weaver as secretary treasurer.
Move approval.
Just deliberation, for sure.
No other names for sure.
Second. Before we get any other names.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just want to make a comment, I understand these are not just titles, these are working positions that require a lot of effort on those folks' behalf. And I truly appreciate them stepping up to do this work.
Thank you, Lance. So appreciate it. Appreciate that. All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 10 is report and vote on the fiscal year 23-26 TIP amendment. Zach?
Yes, thank you. We have a TIP amendment request from the city of Des Moines. This is for their Walnut Street Bridge replacement project. We have awarded them in the past $3.4 million in STBG funding. The total cost of the project previously was $11 million. The change that they're requesting is to move their project into federal fiscal year 2024 and to increase the total cost of the project to $21 million. So the federal aid side will not change, but they are requesting that they increase that total project amount to the 21 million. We're required to bring this forward to you as an amendment because of that project increase for the cost, and then also because they're requesting to move it forward to 2024 in the TIP. So this item is before you for your approval. If you have any questions about it, I'd be happy to take them.
Is this Gatto taking more?
I'll move approval.
Is this Gatto taking more from?
Oh, it's
It's like a multi-level bridge apparently. I don't know.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Oh, come on, leave it hanging a little longer, guys.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? That carries. Thank you. Item 11 is report and vote on the MPO appointment to the SUDAS Board of Directors. Todd?
Yeah, thank you. The MPO periodically appoints a technical rep to serve on as the MPO's rep on the statewide urban design standards board of directors. SUDAS is it helps develop the standards that communities use on the road and bridge projects. Mark Miller from the city of Ankeny has served that role since August of 2016. His term is expiring and he offered to continue to serve in that capacity. We brought this up at the tech committee last week. There were no other nominations from the floor and they voted to approve Mark to continue to serve in that capacity. So we would recommend approval. Happy to answer any questions.
Move. Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 12 is a report and vote on the DOT 2019 to 2023 safety performance targets, PM1Z.
Thanks. The Federal Highway Administration has a highway safety improvement program that requires DOTs and MPOs to report safety performance measures. So last month we brought the DOT statewide measures to your review. Now this month we bring these back to you with a vote. There are no consequences to MPO for not meeting or making progress towards these programs. And there are any questions on these, then can hit them at this time, otherwise staff and people of the DOT statewide safety program.
It's just a report though, right? I didn't see a vote.
Yeah, it's a report.
Vote.
It's a report
No, I didn't see
vote.
that here.
Move. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. Item 13 is report and vote on the 22-25 pavement and bridge performance reports.
Yeah, thank you. These are the next set of federal measures. These are on 2-year cycle, 2 and 4-year cycles instead of the annual ones. Again, you can adopt the DOT statewide targets of our own, but we've just adopted the DOT statewide targets in the past. Again, no penalties for not meeting anything with progress towards these targets. Staff recommends.
Move approval. Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. Item 13, report and vote on the 22-25 pavement and bridge report, system and brake performance target, PM3.
Thank you. The last set of federal measures in our system and create reliability of the set on 2 and 4 year cycles. We just adopt the state DOT. They might target on our own regional one, but we just adopt the statewide DOT one that has staff and approval.
Move approval. Second.
Motion to second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. All right, item 15, thank you, Z. Item 15 is report on the fiscal year 23 second quarter budget report. On that.
So with all your discussion, there has been a lot of learning of what the MPO with all the other finances and stuff are. And I will say the bookkeeper, Brett, has been working with me. That's the outside source. And then also Joe with the audit has been giving me insight. So this is all kind of new for me. On there, the only thing that I will bring attention to, I guess, is there, like I said, last quarter, there is a couple that are at the higher, but those are expenses that came right away at the beginning. And that would be like our membership and some of our professional services being the audits, and those are already taken care of for the year.
So there would be no more, because that was my question, that 80%, we're not gonna go over that.
I can't guarantee that we won't have more legal fees. I mean, with some of the other.
Oh,
things
yeah,
that come out.
legal fees.
But.
Everybody
as part
says
of
that.
The main ones that are in the budget, we have covered what was originally in there, so. And then at the bottom of the personnel special studies, there's a couple of things that have come into our account and then just was paid right back out. So when you look at the income part of it and you see the higher amounts on there, that is because those deposits came into the MPO and was sent right back out. One of them being a water trails check. It should have gone directly to their account, but it came into the MPOs. So that came in, went right back out. Same with Des Moines Industrial. That was money that came in, went right back out. It wasn't our funds to keep. So that's where you'll see a couple of higher numbers in there that aren't originally in our budget.
Will that continue to be that way with the Water Trails project? Is that how,
I
because
think
Des Moines
so.
Industrial's finished, right, Todd?
Yeah, Des Moines Industrial is finished. The DOT, we're working with them. Their accounting software wouldn't allow 2 different accounts for the MPO account numbers. So, but we're working through that process so the money just goes straight into the Water Trails account and stays separate. So we're working with the DOT on that.
And any other questions you have on there?
Don't really have questions, but I'll reiterate my previous, I think we need monthly. And I'm not sure, maybe we need to work with the auditor and the finance committee on the formatting and what we're getting.
And we have this working on getting QuickBooks to match our budget. That's what I've been working on, is to get the same things in there. But what was in there before, you have to get cleared out first. So we needed to get 2022 wrapped up with the audit. And then we're working, Joe has given me some pointers on how to get that fixed so that it lines up with exactly what's on our budget. So then I can just bring up QuickBook reports each month.
Yeah,
And
that'd be
you
great.
can see both.
And the finance subcommittee did talk about wanting the revenue side in there as well, rather than just expenses, which we've been showing. So
And
that
that's
was
why I
added.
went ahead and added that. on
But
the
we'll
back.
continue to refine that, make sure it's in
And
a
I'm
format that
looking forward
everyone's
to
comfortable.
being a part of that discussion, just so I can understand what we're doing.
I'm looking forward to you to being part of that.
Me too.
All right. All right, thank you, Rhonda. All right, we're gonna take things a little bit out of order here. I was just talking to Dylan. I think it makes more sense, frankly, to have a discussion on our last strategic direction meeting, and we can have some follow-up on that, and I think that's gonna then, whatever we just discussed and have some discussion on that will drive what we're gonna talk about as far as the report on the work program and the budget for next year. So I'm gonna take it out of order. We're gonna go to item 17 first and just talk, have a follow-up on the strategic direction meeting. Todd, you wanna just kind of kick it off as far as where we were?
Yeah, thank you. So, we had the strategic direction meeting on the 12th. There were some items that were asked for staff to look at and prepare some follow-ups on. One was the MPO Legal Counsel review of the 2080 agreement and the opinion that what was authorized under that 2080 agreement. We provided that to you yesterday. Scott's here to talk about that further if you have questions. The brief answer for that was that broadly grants the MPO the power and authority to carry out activities described in the 2080 agreement to conduct its business, to cooperate and contract with legal recognized entities such as the Polk County Housing Trust or Story County Housing Trust or Story County, or whatever entity that is. Back one slide. One other item was asked about return on investment for members based on the STBG and TAP funds they received compared to assessments. We provided that yesterday in the reminder notice as well. I'm happy to discuss that further. There was some discussion with the MIPA Executive Committee about moving non-transportation contracts to MIPA. We had that discussion. They seemed agreeable, at least initially. We need some further discussions, and obviously their board would need to meet to discuss that as well. But some initial indications were that was okay. Potentially. And then we also developed a handout kind of providing an overview of the various entities, MPO, SERPTA, MIPA, the Housing Trust Funds, kind of to give a little better understanding of what those different entities were, the geographies they covered, and other information. As I mentioned, some further activities, we're continuing that MPO MIPA discussion. We talked about revisiting the strategic plan. And then we're working on this formal decision tree for future activities as well.
Who's working on that decision tree, Todd? You and your staff?
The staff's working on it, then we'll share it with the committees.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I have to leave, but I got a medical appointment I gotta take off for. I just want to touch base on a couple of things really quickly before I have to leave, but first of all due respect to General Counsel in attendance today for your opinion, Scott. I had asked for one from the Civil Division of the County Attorney's Office. That basically is opposite of what Scott's opinion is. But here's my point, I guess. We can get opinions all day long on the intent of 2080. But at the end of the day, no matter, what that opinion may be on what the 2080 allows for, what it doesn't, I can tell you one thing that's clear is that the executive committee and the policy committee set policy for this organization. That's undisputed. So no matter, we still have to approve it at this level. And it seems to me that after the discussion that we had, strategic plan, and we didn't ever have any really solid outcomes, I don't think. But it seems to me that Todd, and I'll direct this to you, you're having trouble hearing. You're having trouble listening to what the policymakers and the direction they want this organization to go to. And I hate to be that forward, but we've talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. Now I'm reading in the memorandum that comes from you on this tree on the second bullet point. One of the things that were added, it said transportation related projects for non-MPO members were viewed as possibly acceptable if the project would, 1, improve transportation for the MPO area, 2, advance MPO's mission and vision, or 3, contribute to the MPO's financial viability. I never heard anyone, and I've asked people that are sitting here that were there, say that was going to be something we would consider as to whether or not it would contribute to the MPO's financial ability, viability. We're not here to make money, folks. That's not why this was created.
No, we're not here to make money. I agree with you, Tom. It was more of that's in reference, I guess, to what staff thought we heard. And it's just to hold assessments level. It's not to make money. It was to keep our assessments where they're at.
Pat might have wrote it on the poster board. But as we're sitting here, I don't think anyone considers that's at this table as something that should be considered. Well, if we can make money, we can go ahead and do that, or we should go ahead and do that, or it should be considered. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that, but I don't recall it.
I mean, part of it was, we've entered into a lot of these things, and as you go through some of those scenarios that you guys put down in the next, the one that we skipped over, and you went through those scenarios, as you look through that, you have different numbers in there for hours that you are dedicating to the NPO. And, you know, first of all, you need to figure out how many hours these great folks that you've got here are gonna work on NPO stuff. And is it gonna be 18,600, whatever the number is, or is it gonna be the 17,000? Because at that point, if it's the 17,000, then we don't, you know, that many hours, our assessment doesn't get messy with at all as you go through those scenarios. But when you start taking on all these other things, and, you know, we get other folks, you know, that go through Paylocity and then we have the issues there. So, and then when you start splitting in MIPA and dividing it up, you know, staff to do those things, that's where some of these things have become complicated. And, you know, we had our own legal opinion. There is a paragraph in Article 2 of the 28E, the last paragraph, that's very broadly written, and in 2010, when that was signed, our legal department told Rick Clark that it is broadly written that way. And it's, you know, our legal department would agree with everything Mr. Henderson said, except for that particular portion of it, where it does give a little broad sense. And so, you know, I think going forward, our 2080 agreement, if we're going to stick with the transportation and do the things, we need to update that wording. So Todd and his staff have a clear vision of what direction we're going to go and how we're going to get there. And so there's no more of this back and forth that we've been going through.
And Tom, you dropped some notes there. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought we were just double checking it. We can leave for Joe to pick.
I got it. I didn't know if you needed it or not. I didn't know if you needed it.
You know, I mean, to have, you know, these great people we got over there on a roller coaster, like, okay, what are we doing today? What are we doing tomorrow? What, you know, that's not fair to them. And it's not fair to Dylan and Zach and Todd. You know, we need to be clear. And so we need to, you know, we need to prioritize what we're going to do for this region. And, you know, what are we going to work on? You know, there's one thing that we need done in our region, and that is to finish the Southeast Connector. I know some of you guys don't, you know, you're on the other side of the county and things like that, but we built a transload facility that connects Highway 65, the Eastern Polk County. That should be a #1 goal and things that we need to prioritize. That is transportation related. And we need, whether that's grant writing, whether that's using everything that we can do to get that done, and any help that the MPO can get, those are the things that we should be prioritizing. You know, I understand, you know, if we got those scenarios, it just looked like you backed in numbers to figure out how you're going to make it work with the hours that you've divided up all of these folks. And that doesn't work. You've got to figure out how many hours you're going to have these great people work on MPO stuff. Period. That's where you start at. You don't start altering those hours and mixing in other things. That's not right. And so that was my take, and it was pretty clear. There might have been 1 or 2 people in this room when we sat here that maybe would have did some other things, non-transportation related for other non-member communities. But as we sat in those individual groups, I didn't get the feeling that there was a big sentiment that we wanted you to expand kind of your services and compete with, you know, I think we sent a pretty clear message on one of these items that we don't want you competing with those things. So that's my take on it. I'll be quiet, but you.
Well, I'll back up. I'd just say this one thing further. I think anytime you have an organization like this, your workflow ebbs and flows.
It does.
Sometimes you're busy, sometimes you're not. And so when AJ Mum comes back, gets 4 bids, and nobody bids on it, he's got his in a bind and he can't figure out how to get it done. That's the time you come to this organization and say, hey, I didn't get any other bids. I got no way to get this done because I don't have any staff. Does MPO staff have any free time? And if MPO staff has free time to do it with the resources they have, then I think our board would say, yeah, you bet. Help out a member community. But if MPO says, yeah, but we're gonna have to hire a half a person. Now we're saying, well, now it's all getting dumped on this organization and it's not its role.
But we're gonna have to lease more space for more office space.
So I think we just need to be more judicious with how we decide what to do with our time.
For me, I'm encouraged by the conversation that obviously Todd has had with MIPA about moving some of these non-transportation grants or programming over to them. Hopefully that conversation will continue and will occur. That
Yeah.
kind of eliminates some of the questions about, are we going beyond our transportation mission in our 2080 agreement? And I understand that may require some shuttling of staff and budgeting pieces. But I think that cleans up a lot of this, and
We won't be a part of MIPA. I mean, we,
I understand, but it gives an opportunity for some of those things to be someplace else.
and I think the year's pretty much almost up is what Scott Sanders said. It's either this month or the end of the month. And I mean, you know, I'm more looking at, I mean, that's a resolution that we gotta pass at the city, but I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I think that there'll be others on the council that we won't be a part of the MIPA organization because it just complicated this MPO organization. It truly has.
Yes.
And it's not worth me coming in here and having to, you know, do what we gotta do. It's just, it's not worth it.
Well, I talked about that too, is we shouldn't have, I didn't want to join it to begin with, because I didn't see any value. And I would agree with you, I don't see MIPA as a value to help him.
I mean, I know there's been talk that, you know, Wells Fargo's lost a lot of jobs in downtown and, you know, maybe we'll be able to get you $1 million grant. At this point in time, where we're at with MIPA, I've got such a bad taste in my mouth that I want out. And, you know, maybe it's a silly decision, maybe it's but I can't. It's not working. And it's made this whole organization just a mess, in my opinion. And it's got these poor people over here not knowing what the hell's going on.
So again, when we're providing services, I think it needs to be within our geographical area that has been designated. You know, we shouldn't be providing services to any county in the state of Iowa. It needs to be within those member governments that are members of the MPO.
I think that was almost universal at our.
From my
meeting.
understanding, yes.
I think the decision tree is really key. That's gonna provide the clarity. So that where it's really documented out, like what we just went through with that previous contract, right? Like, how does it fit within that decision tree? And then everybody's gonna understand where we go. It should be, once we can get that laid out, I think it'll be a lot more clear. I mean, the Tom's point about the financial thing, I agree with them from the standpoint that it's not a top line decision. We're not doing it just to make money. It was a consideration, right? That, hey, if it can help offset some fees and assessments, that's great, but it wasn't a top line decision, right?
I think that goes to.
That's the difference.
They come to us and we actually have staff time. You know, the next 6 months, I don't have one of you working very hard on something. That goes to the financial liability in my mind. That helps you decide at that time.
Yeah, it's one small factor.
If you're buried and just gotta hire 5 new people because you guys are out working like crazy, then the financial liability doesn't matter to me. Right. Then it's bad because I'm gonna have to hire somebody. So I guess it works on that.
But we do need to revisit the 2080, just so we can clean it up a little bit. I mean, it is a broad grant of authority is how it was written. And Scott, I'll look at you. I think you'd probably agree with me, that last paragraph that I'm speaking of, Article 2. You know, it's a little broad.
Obviously, I did not draft it on it.
No, I know that.
But it is written broadly and I interpreted it broadly. I just interpreted it differently than Mr. Henderson does.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think everyone, the other legal opinions that are out there would probably be consistent with Mr. Henderson's, other than that paragraph. And that paragraph needs to be cleaned up.
And the only thing I'd say is, there's actually, as a matter of Iowa law, there are very few legal opinions on 2080s in the state of Iowa.
Right.
And only 2 related to 2080.3, which is, I think what Mr. Henderson hung his hat on. And I don't believe that they were directly on point, but, you know, I mean, that being said, I mean, to the point you made, I mean, that's, you know, lawyers get paid to interpret documents and people spend money, yeah. But so, but your point's well taken.
sitting right
Yeah, Bob, sorry.
That's how I make my living. Think I'm doing this for my living?
Yeah, no, I get it.
But to your point, Mr. Gatto, in fact, I mean, you're right, the 2080 that we're operating under right now is, in my opinion, as well as drafted properly.
Yeah, it could be narrowly drafted. The language can be changed with not a whole lot of. You know, once we know where we're going, then there's no reason not to bring it to the communities and just change the language.
Right. Joe, I think that's what I was gonna try to say. That's, I think was what Tom said before he left. I said, it's a difference between what's legal and also we need to decide as a, you know, what policy direction we're gonna head on with this organization. So
this whole process is actually valuable because we focus on those.
Right.
So, all right, well. With that, any further?
We decide anything?
Well, again, Todd, I think
it's very clear. I think, Todd,
I don't think we're done yet, but I think.
Does he have questions? Because I didn't hear much from him the day that we had the strategic planning. Maybe he should be. I mean, do you kind of get where we're going?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So we'll some of the discussion that'll be in the STP and our work program budget is probably a little moot now, but we'll go through it.
well, I mean, that's.
So that impacts obviously what we're gonna talk about next, so. You know, I think we talk about it right now, it's Todd said, it's probably moot, we're gonna have to bring it back next month for the March. executive.
I would say though, you know, with those respect to MIPO or the housing trust funds, is to allow some transition time for those organizations, because if we cut them off completely, it's gonna hurt them. So we can talk about that.
We're not signing up for another year. That's not happening for MIPA.
That's fine.
And as we go into the next agenda, where if you do the Story County contract, you've got MPO hours at 17,859. And it shows that, you know, we're not gonna lose any money, but then if we don't do it, you got MPO hours 18,718. I have no idea how you can say that.
Let's go, let's wrap up.
I don't think that's quite right.
Oh, no, it's right. It's what you gave me.
Well, let's get into it. So we'll wrap up the report on the strategic direction meeting. Let's get back into then item 16 on the planning works program and budget development. I'm gonna turn over, let Dylan make an introductory and then we can take comments from there.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll walk through this, and as I give my spiel, this is our work program. It's our budget for the fiscal year starting July 1st. We've been soliciting more on the work program side of things. We've been soliciting projects from our member communities. Here are the couple of projects that we're aware of so far, and this is still open. We'll still learn things, I suppose. As we talked about, the long range transportation plan will be a big priority for the next fiscal year, as that's due next fall. Vision Zero, Safe Streets for All, we'll talk about that. That's the Vision Zero action plan. We'll talk about that later. The goods movement study is something that was proposed directly from the city of Des Moines, actually. This is in our current FY23 work program. We've done some initial work on it, but they said it's enough of a priority that if we don't get through it all this year, let's make sure we get it in next year. So we went ahead and documented it there.
Is that Vision Zero where Des Moines goes and changes the whole street? And then they come and change it back and then they change it again? Is that what that is?
Not necessarily.
Oh, I'm just curious.
It's to make things safer.
Oh,
So as you go through that fatality,
thank you, Mr.
we can
Powell.
maybe possibly lower the people dying on the street. But those are transportation related items that he's got up here that are probably really important.
So then we'll get into the budget side of things. This is where, to Joe's point, some of the scenarios and so forth. So we've been putting together some initial budget figures. Typically, when we bring it to you at this time of year, we have this a little more fleshed out, but just given the conversation that we just had and the one that we had in January, we wanted to get more direction on that before we hold in on anything there. We did take this to the finance subcommittee last week. They generally supported what we put in there as far as, yeah, all the numbers check out, but they're not the ones making the policy. They wanted this group to weigh in on that. So we'll walk through the figures, we'll talk about the scenarios, and then we'll go from there. In terms of overall expenses to the organization, those are up there on the screen. It was in the agenda packet for you to see. The overall expenses to the organization, and when I say the organization, that's all encompassing of the MPO and its core transportation function, but also the other contracts that we have been taking on, because we are contractually obligated to those. So that includes the salaries and wages for the 11 MPO staff, plus the 1 MIPA staff, fringe benefits, indirect costs, and then other direct costs. The real difference between indirect cost and the other direct cost is shared across everything. So it's shared with MIPA and with SERPA and those others. The direct costs are more specific to whether it's MPO, SERPA, and so forth. So you can see up there, the full project cost is about 2.8 million. I will point out the direct cost, that 729,000 is quite high compared to what we typically do. If we take a look at that a little bit further here, really the reason for that is 2 big projects. One is the Purple Heart Highway feasibility study. If and when we come time for that, we've talked about using MPO reserve funds to pay for that. The other one is the match for the state Safe Streets for All grant, which we'll talk about again later in the agenda, which again, the board agreed to use reserve funds for that. So that makes up a large part of that 729,000. We also have that $72,000 for the travel and demand model consultant that we approved earlier. Again, it won't be $72,000 total in next fiscal year because part of that will be this fiscal year. So these numbers will be reduced a little bit based on that. Everything else in there is pretty standard stuff for what we do as far as putting the audit in there, sponsorships to various things. We do have $25,000 in there for strategic planning. We have that in this year's budget too. We haven't touched it yet, but if and when we want to update our strategic plan, we want to have money in there for the consultant. If we move on to revenue, over here on the left, we have the core MPO DOT funded revenue. Up at the top, we have all the various federal sources of funds. This is from federal highway and federal transit. The total's out to about $1.2 million. And then we have the assessments from our local communities. We are receiving repayment for the Transload project now. That'll continue for a few years. So that's in there. The $10,000 contract in Polk County for watershed management that Tom Hawkinsmith mentioned earlier, that's in there. And then there's 2 pulls from reserve funds to pay for those 2 projects that I covered earlier. So those kind of cancel each other out. We then have what we're calling other possible contracts. And this is to that conversation we just had. We have the ongoing contracts. We have contracts for all of these except for the Story County one. So you can see what those revenue sources would be. And we only show those because those impact the various scenarios that we'll talk about here in a moment. Just while we're on the topic of Story County, that is the project that was awarded to the MPO, and that kind of kicked off a lot of these strategic conversations. Story County has indicated they're going to reissue that RFP based on lack of MPO accepting that contract. So that'll be reissued. So if that were to go to MIPA, for example, there's no guarantee that'll happen. So then if we get into the scenarios, and this is to Joe's point here. I thought I had on there the staff hours on this screen as well. In the agenda packet, there's more detail to this. You can see all the hours for all the individual staff people, but just
Yeah, they don't correspond.
What's that?
They don't correspond. I mean, you've got 18,636 hours for one scenario.
Sure. Well, I guess it's up here. Okay, it's right here. It's just looking in the wrong spot. So yes, and I can explain how this works. So if we
There you go.
If we
There's
take-
the 17 is the next slide.
Yep, so we'll stay on the scenario 1. This assumes that we continue the contracts with SERPA, MIP, and the housing trust funds. Obviously, that's up for continued discussion with the MPO. But just for sake of argument, because we have those contracts now, we've kept them in here. We've taken the funds available for all these various that I just showed you. So we have the $2.3 million for MPO funding, and then each individual organization, the amount of money they have. We then put enough staff hours in those individual ones to zero those out. So that's why the hours differ between the different scenarios, because in some scenarios we have more contracts, in some scenarios we don't have as many contracts. We And this is debatable, I suppose, but we put enough hours in there in those contracts to zero those out and then put the remainder into the MPO.
Okay, with all due respect, you gotta figure out what the MPO hours are first.
And
You
that's why-
cannot back things out and figure it out that way. You need to figure out how much staff time it does to do the priority of the MPO. Is that 17,000 hours, which is the next slide, or is it 18,634? Because if you're telling me you can do MPO stuff at 17,000 hours, then I expect you to do it at 17,000 hours, not at 18,634 hours. So Dylan, that, to me, that you're just backing things in. You gotta tell me which hours you need to do MPO stuff. And you kind of commingle those things to make the numbers look different at the end. I mean, so I that confuses me, because you're telling me you can do MPO stuff at $100,000 less, basically, at the 17,000 hours. Then you can, but then you turn around and say, if I get all these other contracts, then I'm gonna have 18,000 hours in the MPO. Well, I mean, that's not general. I mean, you just don't do that.
Well, I think it goes to what we talked about a lot at the strategic planning meetings. MPO's staff is picking up a lot of hours off these other contracts. Then it's not showing it. MPO's eating.
But maybe I'm not explaining. I mean, tell me how many hours you need to do the core MPO stuff. How many people you need, how many hours you need, and if you tell me you can do MPO stuff and other contracts at 17,859 hours, then why, when we don't do any contracts, you're telling me you have to have 18,718 hours? That's a difference of $100,000 where we're short when you run that other scenario.
I guess the reason is that money's got to go somewhere. Like, we have the staff is what it is, unless we want to start cutting staff. And there's one scenario that shows what happens if we have to eliminate some staff. But the hours are what they are. There's a finite number of hours. There's a finite number of dollars that go to that. Our indirect costs are what they are. So those have to go somewhere. So once we put those to those contracts to satisfy those obligations, the remaining is put into the MPO. I understand what you're saying of.
Yeah, it's a MIPA senior planner and you've got down zero for those. But up here, you put down zero and you've got still 17,859 hours. So that tells me you can do MPO stuff at 17,859 hours. I don't know why you would change any of those numbers. If you telling me in one scenario you can do MPO business for less hours with MIPA, Housing Trust Fund, and Story County, you can do all the MPO stuff still at 17,859 hours, and you're taking on all this other stuff. But then we back out all this other stuff, and you're telling me now you're going to do 18,718 hours. Well, you have less stuff to do. Doesn't make sense.
I've been trying to be quiet here,
No way.
but I've got to run to another meeting, but I do want to say something. We've had a broad discussion about who we are and what we are and where we're going and what MPO's obligations and responsibilities actually are and how we're going to spend the money to do that. I still think it's a little unclear exactly who we are and what we're supposed to be doing as we plan transportation for this whole region for the next, laying the base and foundation for the next 100 years. We got $2 million not that long ago to do what we called, as you recall, the Tomorrow Plan. And we looked at how the area was constituted. We were going to look at goods movement, which is part of, even doing the Southeast Connector and connecting that transload facility to get, shall we say, motor freight off the road and get it, all of our Iowa people onto a cheaper way to move goods and services that they'll tell us that the rail is about 75% less money than motor freight. So we're trying to help everybody out. And so that's one thing that we all thought about and we did is we did the Southeast Connector and every piece of it to get it to where it is today. And we can't seem to finally get it over the line. That's just one example. But as I think about where people live and where they work and what their necessities are, that was part of what that tomorrow plan was all about. We were gonna not just build roads and then decide how we're gonna use those roads after the fact. We need to decide what the land use is before. We've learned some lessons here in the city of Des Moines for the past number of years with some of the derechos and flooding and everything else. There are certain areas we shouldn't build. And so rather than build a road to go by there and find out later that we shouldn't have built there, that's what the whole tomorrow plan was all about. And where on that is we think about the future of transportation. Todd, you were there.
Yep.
We were in Washington. And talked with all kinds of different departments on what transportation ought to look like and how we plan it for the future for our area to make benefit for all those people in all those businesses to make our metro area the most exciting, inviting, productive area in the Midwest, not just central Iowa, but in the Midwest. And there's those that think that we have made a lot of progress on that model. There are those that say from the national media that will tell us that we're the best place for an urban part of Iowa. There's nothing like it between Chicago and Denver. They say that. We need to keep moving that way. What do we need to do to make that happen? Let's spend our dollars wisely. Let's do the transportation planning. How are we going to move people around? What does it look like? How's it efficient? How do we make it safe? All those things that relate to transportation. I think that's what we're all here to do and to think about as we move forward. And again, this is not just for today. This is planning for the next 20, 50, 100 years.
All right.
I'm done. For today.
Peace out, mic drop.
Drop the mic.
All right, so Joe, to your point, and I'm looking at this again, and Todd, Dylan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the difference in hours is, the way I look at these numbers is that.
It's a principal planner.
Well, let me finish it, but we're leveraging some of these hours to other organizations, and if we don't do that, we still have the same folks that are the same needs that are we're gonna need here, and so. Right?
So they have to go somewhere.
The hours have to go somewhere.
Exactly. So in between these budget scenario 1 and 2, you're adding in the Story County. So there's 1,000 hours that go to Story County. That means there's 1,000 hours less for MPO, which is, I think, what you're pointing out.
I mean,
We could do the reverse and show, here's what it just takes to do the MPO, here's what the budget will allow.
you told me what it takes to do the MPO. It's 17,000 hours.
That's assuming we leverage.
No, that's period. Well, it doesn't matter if we leverage. If you're telling me you can do that, the MPO stuff, no matter what, Bob, at 17,859 hours, why would that ever change? If you tell me you can get all that work done, like you said you could, at that many hours.
So we haven't identified what the work products are going to be necessarily yet. We've started with what's our budget scenario going to be that will tell us how many hours. And then from that, we will tell you, here's what we can accomplish throughout the year. So that's where we just need a philosophical discussion of which one of these scenarios do we want to go with? Which contracts are we going to continue to do that? Which will have an impact on our budget and the number of hours. And from there.
Yeah, I disagree.
flesh out
I disagree with that.
the scope.
You need to figure out what the hours are going to be used at the MPO and CERPA level.
I would say since they haven't done it for so long, they probably don't know. Because
But they're telling you.
they're mishmashing hours back and forth between other forecasts,
It's right there.
but they probably don't know.
You know, we do.
You put it down right here in front of us. I mean, I guess that makes me extremely confused if you don't know. You've got these hours. It doesn't make sense that you have 3 different numbers to do MPO and certain.
With the additional contracts, we do get some additional revenue. We can do some additional work for the MPO with that additional revenue. If we don't have those additional contracts, our budget drops.
We just gave away $71,000 because you said you didn't have enough people to do it.
I mean, that would have paid for almost one whole person for the year. I mean, so, I mean, that's transportation related, and you told me, well, we don't have enough time to do that, so we're gonna sub it out.
We don't have-
Okay,
Don't have the expertise. Doing model updates is very, very technical. It's a very niche set of skills. And we don't have enough work of that all the time to keep someone on staff to take, to do model updates year round. We don't have enough work for that, or frankly, we can't afford someone to do that because their rates would be crazy to have someone on staff for full time to do that.
And that's the purpose of things like
Yep.
that.
Here's where we are. We're losing people. How many do we have on? How many do we have on?
We've lost Stephanie.
We're,
Yeah,
I mean,
I think we have some direction. We're gonna have a draft. If they any questions now on this, the process is we come back with a draft of this executive charge next month. We can further refine it based on discussion today and.
Yep.
when is that meeting in March, for this,
It'd be March 8th.
okay. March 8th is good.
and we can refine some of this and share it back out before that meeting.
Yes.
I guess I have one thing maybe to put into this before Dylan and Todd start working on it. And that in our general accounting policies, we say each work element in the Des Moines area MPO program is charged for direct personnel costs and for the proportion of the indirect costs. We're saying that, but yet we've entered into contracts that quite frankly have a fixed dollar amount. So we're not really charging them for getting money and then,
Well, we figure in that fee when we charge them what that direct and indirect is for us.
so we may or may not know actually how many hours we put into that. It could be more or it could be less. Is that true?
Well, when we enter into a contract, we set, here's the number of hours, and from that number of hours, this is what's covering the indirect versus the other personnel costs. So we know what that is, we, don't exceed that, or we do exceed in the contract.
Okay.
And we track that through our payroll, how many hours are in that project, so we know. But yeah, we base it on an estimated hours when we prepare the contract.
And if it goes over, Dylan is saying that we would, again, modify or amend that and get that additional dollar back.
Correct.
Okay.
You absolutely do on that.
No, I think the discussion's done, and we've got.
Would you have, I mean, you have further questions that you want to bring up?
I think I mean.
Well, I want to get, as I said, I'm not trying to stifle this guy. I just want
No,
to
I
make
know,
sure,
listen, I know that.
I just want to make sure we're being effective here too.
I guess one question that I would have, in these scenarios, we're obviously showing the contracts. Are people comfortable with the MPO SERPA contract continuing? It's outside the MPO area. It's, it's
Not completely.
no, it's completely outside the MPO area. It's by definition, the area not in the MPO.
Yeah.
Some of the members overlap. Polk County is a member of both.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure that we don't proceed down a path of continuing this and then these questions get raised later and.
Historically, I think we've been a part of it, and that hasn't ever brought up the issues that we got with those other three columns. We haven't had a whole lot of discussion, and I mean, I've been here for, I don't know, 8 years. Bob, you've been here a hell of a lot longer than me. We've had those two organizations. Yeah, we've had those organizations in there. We've never really had any issues like we're having now, I would say. Those are transportation things. I mean, those, it was the creation of those other three organizations and adding staff and adding the lease to this property. And those are the things that brought up all the issues that we're at right now.
And I would point out too, in this budget scenario that we're proposing, there's no additional lease, there's no additional staff. So it's continuing, but to your point stated. I guess same question for MIPA though. if understanding the housing trust funds, and as was pointed out, there's been some discussion of can we put those under MIPA, for example? No guarantee that's, if they don't, and the MPO still wants out of it, that's a discussion for another time. But the MPO MIPA relationship, that's something that I think, as we talked about in the previous item, probably needs to continue having that discussion, and what's that long-term relationship look like? But for the purposes of this budget, is that going to be an issue to continue putting that in there?
Well, I think it is, because if I'm not a member of MIPA and any decisions come up under the MPO board policy or exec, I mean,
And again, if it has its own board, this would just be the contract to allow staffing and to host their staff person here.
That's a contract that's been put in place, right?
That contract,
For how much longer?
it's renewing, it's just ongoing.
it's an
until it's-
annual renewal where the annual renewal is either up, I think, this month or March 1st, correct? Is when we started it, is when you got the.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the
each
contracts. I
community.
think the contract is just, it continues until either party gives. However many.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your objection, Joe. I would be hesitant to pull the rug out from under them with no notice, right? I don't think that would be operating in good faith. So I think we just need to have the conversation and then put in place a transition plan if that's what the decision is. But
Yeah, I would recommend a transition plan if that's the direction we want to go, that we don't cut them off at the knees yet. And then figure out a timeline of when it transitions to its own organization.
When are we still putting money in then, Todd? Is the contract, are you expecting like an assessment to us like we made originally? Is that next month? For another year?
The assessments would go out at the beginning of the fiscal year, so.
Fiscal year,
Oh,
so
that's- some
we-
fiscal year.
some communities have reached out for that assessment. What is expected to be?
The organization formally started last April, and the communities joined on for the fourth quarter of the fiscal year, and then all of the current fiscal year. So fourth quarter of 22, all of 20.
Okay, so we have a transition plan until July 1st, really. So you would have notice that if Des Moines wasn't going to participate or any other community, that would give you a transition period until July 1st, until another assessment would come up.
Sure. I mean, that would help understanding what the MIPA budget looks like, but the overall question of,
Yeah, MIPA.
does the MPO and MIPA still have a relationship? Should we be factoring in a contract and the revenue from that contract in the MPO's budget? Because that affects the MPO's budget quite a bit.
Especially for the support service side.
Yeah. And it affects both organizations, but since we're here for the MPO, that's what I'm curious about.
I think that's a greater discussion, but I agree, if we decide to separate, there needs to be some discussion and a period of time to allow them to get their feet under them.
It's just good business.
All right?
Yeah.
And the Story County Housing Trust Fund, in one scenario, you're saying it's gone, then you're saying you're sending out an RFP, and then I see it mentioned here.
So there's there's the Story County Housing Trust Fund, and then there's Story County Board of Supervisors contract. So that's Story County, that's the latter one. The Housing Trust Fund is lumped in with the HTF one. So we've shown two different scenarios, one that doesn't have anything, one that continues the Housing Trust Fund contract, but never has the other one that went out for RFP.
So that scenario right there, if you change that to the 17,000 hours that you had on the previous one, there's no deficit. There's no negative number there. That's the difference.
We can look at that. I'll have to
Well,
plug in
that's
the
the
numbers,
difference.
but
How you do it is by hours though, Joe. I mean.
You don't
You put it in there the other way, it's hours. You're telling me in the scenario before, Bob, that you can do MPO things and CERTA things at the 17,000 hours.
But those hours are people too. So you have,
Well,
we'd have to cut some
that's
significant costs. to make that.
that's the other thing is that, you're leverage, to some extent, you can leverage some of those hours. You still have the same essentially fixed cost for those people. And so that's the way I see
we
it.
hire people for MIPA.
But
Well,
they're paid
not
for
on their-
entirely
they're
by
not-
them.
they're-
The MIPA is
they're not
paid
on-
by MIPA.
I think what they're trying to say is each employee over there maybe does a little bit of work for this,
Right.
that organization. And so when you cut 1,000 hours, it's 100 for this person, 100 for that person, that person. So you really have to go back in and figure out, to your point, can we get it done in 17,000? Then what you're saying is, let's look at our employees maybe we have an extra employee.
Well, I mean, the audit, the audit said that we're not taking things from start to finish. I mean, that's one of our deficiencies. And part of that is having too many people working on too many things.
What-
We've got to correct that.
What aren't we doing start to finish?
That's what the audit said, that you have deficiencies in that. Where you're not, one of your staff isn't handling something from start to finish. And where it's passed on to other things. That's the way that I understood it. Am I
That's
correct?
Within the financial standpoint.
Okay, well, isn't,
That's why we hired the accountant person to help rectify that situation.
okay.
But to your point, if you cut those out, you do need to analyze your staff. That's the time to do it. And maybe you do cut a whole person out and everybody takes on those roles, because they have extra time now too. And maybe you have the right amount of people and some of them have extra time at time, and that's when you do go to Polk County and take that process from them.
That's my point is.
Right. You're always gonna have free time with your employees here and there.
So when you look at hour, I mean, they're not independent contractors, not hiring them by the hour, they're here and they're full-time.
Once they're full-time, there's X number of hours.
I guess the issue with
But they
that
were
is,
hired for MIPA Housing Trust Fund in Story County.
No, we didn't hire anyone for Story County. We hired for MIPA, but that's paid by MIPA. That's MIPA's employee. The Housing Trust Fund employee is paid by the Housing Trust Funds. No MPO money goes to those.
So then you should be able to do it for the 17 hours, the 17,000 hours then, MIPA. And you can hang your head all you want, but you put those numbers in there. I didn't put those numbers in there. You've got different hours for different people, in 3 different scenarios, Todd. That does not make zero sense to me as, first of all, a business owner or anyone else. I understand the ramifications of what I'm saying, but you created this. I did.
But Joe, again, we're going around and round. I understand. Can I just say a point and then we're gonna move on? I understand it from the fact that, I think it speaks to the fact that we were able to leverage on. Some, but let's take a look at it. We have the draft next month and we'll revisit it next month. All right, we are at 123. We have information items. What do we want to hit? Who wants? Or Todd, where do we want to go?
Go to. We're doing the TIP program development. We've talked with your tech committees, your staff on that. So we'll get the draft TIP out in May to the DOT. We received notice from US DOT that we received a $1 million grant, and that was a joint application from MPO and SERPTA. This is item 19. For the Safe Roads for All grant. This is due a planning study for both the MPO and for SERPTA. 800,000 for the MPO, 200,000 for SERPTA. Those have to be matched by local funds. Once the plan's completed, communities within the MPO and SERPTA would be eligible for implementation dollars. So that's the reason we want to do the plan on a region-wide basis. Those are the main points I need to hit. Dylan, do you want to hit anything on the legislative side?
I guess one thing on legislative side of things, we'll jump to there. The earmarks and the DC list is something we wanted some feedback on. The House voted to keep earmarks, and we've heard from Representative Nunn's office. We reached out to them and they provide us the instructions for how to submit that. They want those in by March 7th. We have been holding off on developing a DC trip list until we knew whether earmarks were a thing. So now that we know they are a thing, we have to develop that fairly quickly to get it into the DC book. Our recommendation would be that we just create a list of projects that are actively seeking federal funds, such as earmarks, raise grants, if the airport has something, and supplement that with any policy initiatives like the
Southeast Connector should be
Yeah, that's in there for a
raise
raise
grant.
grant,
Yeah, I mean, that should be the number one priority.
But
that we
rather than
ask
doing a
Mac.
big cattle call for, hey, give us whatever your
No, I mean,
priorities are,
I
we
mean,
just want to limit it to just those projects that are actually in front of people in DC.
it's the last year we get to apply for the race grant, to finish that road. I would think that should be the number one priority to get that road completed. And Representative Nunn should know that, and that should be our number one ask from him to get that road completed. And we can ask the full policy committee, but I mean, this is the last year we can apply for that. So if that's not our number one priority, then somebody can tell me what it is. The Purple Heart Highway, absolutely the weight limitation legislation, that should be included also. If other people have raised grants and the airport or whatever the case may be, then yeah, we can discuss that, but this is our last go around, guys.
I'll
It's
reach
expensive
out to Zach.
It's an expensive project and we gotta get it done. And it's frustrating that that should be listed as number one on any DC trip that we go to right now. I mean, come on, we built a train facility to make it work.
I think that's,
Nobody likes us on the east side.
It's not just it's for everyone. Good reasons. Stop it, Ted.
heat it up for him.
You did.
I would just note too, we have a representative orientation scheduled next week prior to the policy meeting, so if share that with your peers. If you can't make it, we'll do one-on-ones.
Yeah, what was the date on that? I'm sorry.
16th.
Yeah, I'm out of town, so I want to get one, so I'll go.
We'll do that.
He's keying it high and letting it fly.
All right,
Awesome, Jimmy.
we do need to vote on, we don't have a quorum, so what do we do? Oh. We don't meet this month?
Well, there's a lot of stuff on there with policies got to vote on, so.
I'll vote for Tom.
We can do an electronic vote. So we could send out the agenda, revised agenda, and as long as this group's okay with that, we can send that out and get everybody's opinion that way.
Can we take tally the vote from everybody still in attendance, so you don't have to count them?
Yeah. That'd be super.
All right, so.
Move approval.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, anybody, all right, any opposed? All right, so we have those bits at least, then you'll get the rest, get a form.
Yeah.
All right, anything else for the good of the order today? Stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.